All right, we are here for another Tuesday evening. We are a little bit before 5 o'clock, but that's okay. We'll go ahead and wait to give some people a few minutes to show up. You'll notice we're not in one of the two typical locations tonight. This is a Q&A episode, so I will be answering questions that you guys have. I have one question from YouTube, and we'll just have a nice conversation tonight. So I am working tonight, live streaming from my office, and which is upstairs in the house. It's not in the basement where the casting station is, or the shop. What's going on, Angie? We'll go ahead and give people a couple minutes to show up. We're just about 5 o'clock right now. Steve, how's it going? How you doing? Steve over at Harneal Media, he manages my website, cross-cut-creations.com. I have information over there. I do blog posts about the day after the live streams. I also have products for sale. I have logo merchandise, handmade products, and other such things. So if you want to support the Crosscut Creations shop, that is one way to do that. Check out the website and see if that's for you. Angie says she's currently sitting at work. That's a bummer. Hopefully it's hopefully the last few hours goes quickly. I'm gonna hope. We'll give people another minute or two to show up, and then we'll talk about the project, the castings from 2 weeks ago. Since we had technical difficulties last week, we didn't do a live stream, or the live stream didn't happen. It's been, last week I think it was just a fluke that it didn't work out. My computer decided to freak out, and then because it freaked out, I kind of panicked, and it just wasn't meant to be. So we'll go over the flip cup pour that we did 2 weeks ago, and then we'll have a conversation. Jim, you're cutting up some tomatoes. Those sound delicious. What are you going to use the tomatoes for? Some burgers, some salads. Dave's Creations, what's going on? It's good to have you here. I'm going to copy the link real quick to the social medias just to see if anybody wants to show up. And then we'll go ahead and get started. We will share, copy link. Okay. Okay. Okay, so Carol says, wish my Jersey tomatoes would come in. Yeah. Mark, look at you, pretty boy. Yeah, that's what happens when you get a little a little off the sides and a little off the top. I got a comment on one of my pictures today that was the signal that we were going back. It was about that time that summer was over. So, alas, we'll get back into the swing of things soon. Dave's Creations. Tonight we're going to do a Q&A. Things, last week we didn't have a live stream due to some technical difficulties on my end. So sorry about that. Yeah, it is what it is. So we'll go over we'll go over last week's projects. Then I'll show you guys something else that I had cast, and then we'll do a little Q&A. Homemade tomato paste sauce or homemade tomato pasta sauce. That should be tasty. Angie says that she can't grow anything to save her life. Maybe you just haven't found what you're good at yet in terms of growing vegetables or plants or something like that. I don't know. All right, so let's go ahead and look at last week's projects. So last week, or I guess it really should be 2 weeks ago, but we did these. We did this flip cup pour with some divine pigments. The light is kind of hard to focus on there, but these are the blanks that we did. If I turn on my phone flashlight, it might help us a touch, but these are slightly better. Yeah, so that's what they look like in that light. So that's the 3-color flip cup pour with some divine pigments, and there are 5 blanks there. So these are Alumilite Clear Slow, and these are available. I also did another run of the Chaos cutoff castings. So again, I used divine pigments. These are dominantly blue, but there are swirls of white and pink in there. So if I go ahead and you can kind of see, let me put these down for a minute. You can kind of see that they've got the chaos cutoffs in them. So there's one. Here's another one. These ones were done off camera. I just did these throughout the week. I put them in a block mold. I did glue the chaos cutoffs down so they didn't float this time. So I'll be real interested to see how these turn, because these ones, I think they've got a lot of hidden beauty in these. The camera isn't picking up just how just how many swirls are in these with the white and the pink. So this was the block of chaos cutoff casting 2.0, if you will. So those were quite a bit of fun. Okay. So Dave says he can't have a garden. Is that looks great? I would turn them. Thanks. Thanks, Dave and Angie. I also want to take a minute to thank my patrons, Mark and Angie. I appreciate you guys a ton. Be looking out in the mail in the next couple days. I've got something coming both your ways. So thank you again. If that's something you guys are interested in at any level, I do have Patreon set up. There is a link in the description of this video. So if you're interested in that, check it out. If not, not a big deal. But thank you guys. Okay, so we are going to go ahead and get into questions. So the question and answer portion. Before I do the questions before I answer the questions that I got, or the question that I got, I thought I'd go ahead and take a little bit of time to talk about my just how I got into making and how I got to where I got to be today. So it was almost 6 years ago at this point. Time flies. My wife and I were we were getting ready to close on our first house, the house that we're in now. And I realized that I didn't really know anything. So for Christmas, I asked for just a cheapo drill, maybe a couple other basic homeowner tools, and just called it a day. Well, when we moved into our house, you know, Mr. or Mrs. Landlord wasn't available anymore to call. So we kind of had to, figure things out ourselves or pay out the wazoo for the things that should be fairly standard DIY fixes. So I did the only thing I knew. The only thing I knew to do was to go to YouTube University, and I watched a video. We were trying to fix something. I honestly don't even remember what it was at this point, because it was 6 years later. But I typed in, how to fix whatever it was, and YouTube gives you the suggested videos. And one of the suggested videos was from ironically enough now, it was from a predominantly metal guy who does predominantly metalwork, Keith Rucker over at vintagemachinery.org. He was one of his videos was suggested, and it was like 20 or 30 minutes, and it was how to build a wooden bench. And that was almost 6 years ago, like I said. Well, I watched that video and said, he made that seem really doable, really attainable. That might look interesting. So over time, I shifted from enjoying home renovation DIY projects to more shop projects. To this day, guess who still hasn't built a bench? It is on my list one day, but I almost wonder if now it's almost a running joke that I haven't, because of course, after I watched that video turned into another suggested video, turned into another suggested video. So I ended up going down the rabbit hole of watching all the, big name YouTubers who got their start early, or at least were on the YouTubers that were on YouTube, 5, 6, 7 years ago, whatever. The guys who have massive channels now, and I'm sure if I tried to name them, I'm sure I would, for as many as I would name, I'm sure I would forget, that many more. So, all the regulars. So then I kind of eventually worked my way through to turning, and I was watching Bob Lee's channel. I believe he is rebranded to Bob Lee's Woodworking and things. Let me, what was it? Let me check. Because I know he just recently rebranded. Bob Lee's Wood Shop and Other Things. That's what it was. That's his channel. I knew that he was, I was considering getting into the YouTube game, and I knew that he shot his videos on an iPad. So at the time, that's what I was going to be shooting on. So I just sent him a message out of the blue and said, "Hey, Bob, I know that you shoot on an iPad, and I'm considering YouTube." This was a couple years into my, or a year or two into my making journey. But I said, "I'm considering putting things on YouTube. What kind of advice do you have, or what kind of tips can you offer?" And he ended up calling me, and the first conversation we had, I'm pretty sure, lasted like 2 hours. So as we were talking, it turns out that he lives like an hour and 15 minutes east of me. So we've actually been to each other's shops um, a handful of times, just to learn to make pens. We made our own lathe tools, and he's the one who really kind of got the whole ball rolling on that. So as I was looking up lathe videos and turning videos, one of the YouTubers that I found, or one of the YouTubers that I stumbled across, was Bob from RJB Wood Turner. And that's when the shift really happened. I went from general woodworking to, I went to basically binge watch most of his videos, and we are pretty good friends today. And I've met Bob RJB Wood Turner a handful of times in person at the different pen shows and whatnot, and he has really helped with my pen turning, and that's kind of where things are today. So I'm sure I left out a bunch of details, for sure, but that's generally how things got started. Um, Jim says before YouTube, there were how-to books. There still are how-to books. Um, there are a lot of people that use them. I do have a couple books that I need to look into. I have both of David Picciuto's books, the Cutting Board book and the bandsaw box book. I think it would be really cool to build a bandsaw box one day, but right now I don't have my bandsaw dialed in to the point where I would trust it to make a bandsaw box. So this is a Q&A session. So I'm going to pull up the question that I got earlier, but if you guys have any questions and you guys want to, if you guys want to know anything either about a process that I have, or my maker's journey, or what I do, even if it's not making related, go ahead and throw it in the chat, and we'll have a conversation. But the one question that I did get came from Angie, so thank you. I appreciate that. Angie says, let me pull up the comment. It says, "What advice would you give someone who is wanting to start turning?" So that is kind of like the that's kind of like the I see so many videos out there. What tools do I need to start woodworking? Here are the top 5. Here are the top 10 tools to start woodworking. And there are some general tools that I would definitely recommend. Sorry, my laptop is kind of shaking right there. We're good though. One of the I would definitely get a drill. That's pretty standard, because even if you don't get heavy into certain projects, you can still use that around the house. An impact driver, that would be a step up. So if you get to it, great, but you probably need a general saw of some sort. For general woodworking, I would say, only buy the tools that you are going to have for the projects that you're going to build. So if you look at a project and you lay out your project and you think about the steps that it's going to take, figure out what tools you're going to use, buy those tools, and then over time you'll amass a collection of tools. that will fill out your shop. So it's similar, so to answer the turning question, what advice would you give someone who is wanting to start turning? What do you want to turn? Um, is your goal to turn big, massive bowls, or are you going to turn longer spindles? Are you primarily going to focus on smaller turned items like pens? Because if you're going to, if you buy a small mini lathe and you expect to turn massive bowls, that doesn't work. So I would really look at the type of projects that you're looking to turn. I would also say buy the best lathe that you can afford at the time. I started on on the big Harbor Freight lathe. It served me well. It got me into turning. It confirmed for me that I really enjoyed turning. So down the road, I was able to upgrade to a better lathe. The lathe I have now is smaller, but it has a lot more features. It's a lot more accurate, and it's an overall better performing lathe. Um, Not to say that the Harbor Freight was a bad lathe. It was a great first lathe, um, but also if you're getting into turning, I would also, you also have to consider, you might not dump all of your money into the lathe, but a good portion of it, because you also have to save up for, the chucks, the mandrels, the bushings, the turning tools. If you're going to go carbide, you're going to need replacement inserts. If you go traditional, you're going to need some way to sharpen those traditional tools. So there's a lot of different factors that go into that. I personally started on carbide. Now you can go to the different stores and you can get pre-made carbide tools, or not pre-made, but already manufactured tools, and there's nothing wrong with those. I was able to save a couple bucks because Bob Lee, who I mentioned earlier, he helped me make my carbide tools. I have a set of medium-sized carbide tools with the round cutter, the square cutter, and the detailer. We also made a little bit later. We also made a larger round cutter carbide and square cutting carbide. I have since gotten some other tools just because over the last couple of years I have been able to do that. I do have a traditional bowl gouge that I sharpen, so I did get a grinder and a sharpening system. That does take some time to learn, and even I don't really know completely what I'm doing when it comes to sharpening. So, it does take some time. I've used a scraper before. There are a whole lot of other options. So just make sure you really know what you want to turn, and then base what you buy off of that. And then when you get into turning, I would start with just some scrap wood that you don't really care about, just to get a feel for, the lathe, get a feel for the tool, and just really, really learn how, how to move your body when you turn. How does the tool react? How does the lathe react? What does that look like? So that would be my, really consider what you're trying to turn and then base it off of that. All right, so if we check the chat, Carl says, hi, Robert. Hi, everyone. Hey, Carl, it's good to have you here. David says, look around for used tools, auctions, Facebook. You don't have to buy new. No, and that's the thing, especially if they're carbide. You get the inserts, and sometimes you can sharpen the inserts, but even if you can't sharpen the inserts, a $15 or $20 insert, if you're getting them on the expensive side, is going to be way cheaper than buying a tool new that could be, 100, 150, 180 bucks. So that is an excellent point. Just hanging out for, looking out on, Facebook Marketplace. I'm sure Craigslist. I'm sure there are sites out there, all the time. Um, Dave's Creation says, I found a good set of wood tools on eBay cheap last week. Yeah. I also used a metal lathe to make pens, and I'm going to turn some bowls very shortly. Yeah. One of the things that I got last Christmas or 2 Christmases ago, I can't remember at this point, but it was the tools to start doing kitless pens, kitless fountain pens, or I guess custom or bespoke pens. I did buy some nibs and some cartridges here. I just haven't used them yet. But one of the things I want to eventually do is get a metal lathe, so I don't have to tie up the wood lathe to do that. But I know I have been looking on Facebook Marketplace and other, Craigslist and things like that for metal lathes, and even used metal lathes are. I haven't found one that has been necessarily in my price range yet. David says, I bought a set of 4 Easywood carbide for $50 at an auction. The large Harbor Freight lathe for a friend for $65. Yeah, and that's the thing. You can do it. You can get into the turning game relatively cheap. It does add up at some point, because even once you have a lathe, well, you need tools. You need turning tools, so those cost something. Even if you're doing it yourself, the materials cost something and your time costs something. So it is more efficient, but it still does cost. If you're planning on drilling blanks on the lathe or drilling anything on the lathe, you're going to need a chuck and you're going to need jaws for that chuck. So that costs something. If you're drilling on the lathe, you need a Jacobs chuck and some drill bits. So those are going to cost something. So, it does add up, but if you have a lathe that's accurate enough and can drill on the lathe, it's a lot, in my opinion, it's a lot more accurate. It's a lot better. When I was using the Harbor Freight lathe, it wasn't super accurate. Or it wasn't accurate enough to drill pen blanks. So I would use the drill press, which was okay. But once I got the new Rikon lathe that I have now, I started drilling my blanks on the lathe, and I stopped marking for center, because I knew I could put that piece of wood in my pen jaws. I could check it once and it was dead center. So it's not even a question of trying to get things necessarily lined up. Now, I think it might take an extra minute or two, but for the precision, you can't beat it. Okay, Dave's Creation says, I am handicapped and have to use a wheelchair, so I use a metal lathe to turn everything. So that's the nice thing about turning, though. Even if somebody has, either a handicap of some sort that doesn't allow them to, stand, you can buy benches or make benches that are at the appropriate height to put your lathe on, and then you can turn sitting down. And that's the one nice thing about turning, is it doesn't have to be. There is certain body movements that happen, but it really is, it really is a friendly. Turning is really a friendly hobby, in the sense that you don't have to necessarily lift anything heavy. You're not worried about doing super stressful glue ups, things like that. So turning, in a sense, is a hobby that can last a very, very, very long time, if you adapt to the conditions. Thomas, what's going on? Thomas says CBN wheels make sharpening a lot easier to learn how to sharpen a grinder. And wheels are one-time expense. Carbide takes money all the time for new cutters at around $20 a piece. Yeah, I started on carbide just because I was nervous about sharpening, and there was that initial expense. There was an initial sticker shock for me. That's why I went carbide to start. But once I got a bowl gouge in my hand and learned kind of how to use the bowl gouge to the point where the tear out was significantly less, that completely changed. Now, right now, I still have the Rikon slow speed grinder with the original wheels. I do have some CBN wheels that are. I do have some CBN wheels in my sights, but the two CBN wheels that I'm looking at do have a price tag that I will have one day. It's just that today is not that day. I do want CBN wheels at some point, but right now I'm just the funds are not there for those CBN wheels at this point. But they will be in the future when I'm old and rich and strike the lottery. That's not happening. I was going to say something, but then I forgot. So this is a Q&A episode. So if you guys have any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. We'll hang out for as long as people are interested. Because that, the question from Angie, what advice would you give someone who is wanting to start turning? That was the only question that I actually got from my Facebook posts. I do eventually want to get more turning tools. Right now I have a 3/8 inch bowl gouge. I do want to get a larger bowl gouge. I also really want to get a skew, but I don't have the jig, or I know I don't have the jig to sharpen the skew, but I also need to do the research on how to sharpen the skew. Because it looks like, a lot of people do use the skew to turn pens and do other things, but it also looks like it leaves a pretty smooth finish. It leaves a good finish. So, who knows? Again, that's another expense. It's a one-time thing. Once you have it, but you have to save up the money to get it. Okay, Carl from Bear Creek Woodworking says, I need a way to sharpen my traditional tools. Is a slow speed grinder the best way to go? I don't know if it's the best way to go. It is a way to go. I know a lot of guys do use them. What they'll do is they'll come with just regular stone, I believe, wheels, but the option to upgrade to CBN, there are definitely companies out there that have CBN wheels that never need dressed. They never need, freshened up or anything like that. But, CBN wheels are anywhere, if I remember correctly, they're anywhere from $150 to $200 a piece. So if you're getting two grits, because you might sharpen your bowl gouge with one grit, but you might use another grit to sharpen the scraper or parting tool or something like that. And there are a bunch of grits out there. It's not just two grits, but if your slow speed grinder takes two wheels, that's a pretty hefty investment. But I know a lot of guys, a lot of turners use slow speed grinders if they're using traditional tools. I know the Rikon has a slow speed grinder that's pretty popular. A lot of people use the Wolverine jig with that to sharpen. The other one is a Tormac, but that's it. That system is a slow speed wet grinder, so it keeps the tools and the stones cooler. Um, but that system by itself, without it, and you don't put CBN wheels on that system, but the Tormac system, that is a pretty hefty one-time cost as well. I don't remember the actual dollar amount on that, but I'm pretty sure that was multiple hundreds of dollars. Angie asks, do you need to stabilize Cholla before casting it? I know some people do if they want to dye stabilize it to give it some color. You can also clear stabilize it if you want. I don't, and I know other people that don't and haven't had an issue with it. I turned one of the pens that I turned, and I'm not sure if it's still here. Oh, here it is. This is a knurl kit from PSI that I cross cut the Cholla. I turned it and finished it with CA, and I didn't have a problem. So there's a cross cut piece of Cholla. I haven't stabilized mine, and I haven't had a problem. Some people stabilize theirs if they want fun colors. So if they want the Cholla to be, red or pink or green or purple or whatever, it's not going to hurt it to stabilize it. Thanks for hanging out with us, Dave. Dave has to head out for now. I appreciate it. David Birch says Stumpy Nubs has a good video on CBN wheels. Yes, and his video is the exact reason why I'm going with the two. Those are the two CBN wheels that I actually have in my sights. I forget the grits that he recommended, but I do remember watching that video, and that is the reason that I'm saving up for CBN wheels. Anytime, Carl. I don't know. I don't know a whole lot. I just speak from my experiences and what I've heard from other people. And that's the thing. I'm just a guy in a basement shop right now. I took one formal class on turning a pepper grinder, but other than that, I have never had I've never attended any formal class. I've never had any, schooling per se. So, this is me just learning based off of YouTube and experimentation in my basement. Bob over at RJB Woodturner has said frequently on his channel, figure out what works for you, figure out what's safe for you in your shop, and go with it. If it works for you and you're comfortable with it, then do that. If it doesn't work, then make an adjustment. I thought that was pretty sound advice, because just because one person does something one way doesn't mean that is the definitive answer. You can get, if you can say 2 + 2 is 4. Well, so is 3 + 1. So is 4 + 0. Just because you do something a different way doesn't make it right, wrong, or indifferent. It just makes it right or wrong. It just makes it different. Now, if it's unsafe, then, maybe some priorities need to be reevaluated. But if you're doing something in your shop that's safe and it works and you're getting a desired outcome, then go with that and just try to keep, make the next project better than the last one. Because if you're not making progress, then, we need to figure out how to get to that next level. Because I can tell you, when I started turning a couple years ago, my first slimline that I did, it's down in my basement. It doesn't work. I somehow messed up the transmission, and I jammed the transmission. I don't know what I did wrong, but it clearly doesn't work. And honestly, it looks terrible. But over years of practice, I'm doing more than just slim lines. I've learned to turn between centers instead of on a mandrel. Not that turning on a mandrel is bad, because I still do that from time to time if I don't have the ability to turn between centers. But processes change in a couple years time, and your technique changes, and the overall process and your overall quality of product gets so much better. I tried a CA finish for a good while, and I actually went through I tried two brands, and I even watched videos, and I couldn't get it to work. And finally somebody said, you have to try Mercury Flex Thin CA. 7 coats, spraying activator in between each coat, and then done. And the first time I tried that method, I could notice, I did notice instant, immediate success. That was, that would have been my best ever CA finish based on all the previous ones. But even then, going forward, you practice more and you get even better at that. Because I can tell you that even once I started using, Mercury Flex Thin CA, the 10th pen I do with Mercury Flex is better than the first pen. The 100th pen is going to be better than the 10th pen, just, by virtue of you learn things. One thing I did, was I switched from white paper towels to blue shop cloths. Blue shop cloths tend to have less of a texture, so so the CA finish goes on smoother, and it allows me to have to do less micro meshing, wet sanding, and cleanup work after I apply the CA. So again, even once I switched to Mercury Flex Thin, I was still looking for ways to improve. And I have, I have a couple videos on my channel now where I go through my process of finishing wood and hybrid blanks. I go through finishing acrylic or resin or epoxy blanks. And that information on those videos is still mostly accurate. I've changed a couple speeds on my lathe of certain processes, but one of the things, even then, since I put those videos out, I'm still learning, still figuring out what works better, what works, what works, what doesn't work. So I'm still tweaking my process, and I've been turning pens for a couple years. I know there are people who have been turning way longer than I have, who are still trying new products for a variety of reasons. So yeah, Jim says the best advice for wheels is to use the standard wheels that come with the slow grinder. When it's time to replace the wheels, you will know. That is true. I set up my Wolverine jig with my slow speed grinder, and I've tried to dress my wheels a couple times, and I've done okay, not great, but okay at best. I can definitely tell, when I put the tip of the gouge onto the stone after I color it in and prep the gouge for turning. I can definitely tell when I swing the gouge side to side to sharpen it. I can definitely tell where there are high spots and where there are low spots, and I know that's affecting the grind of my bowl gouge, and I'm sure it's affecting the grind of my scraper. So that's part of the reason that I'm looking into CBN wheels, because I know CBN wheels, the nice thing is you never have to dress them. You never have to make sure that they're well, you never have to make sure that they're square more than once. You have to install them correctly, but I don't think that takes too much. One of the biggest things is just making sure that you're set up right, and if you take the time to do that, then you're good to go basically forever. Whereas if you have the standard wheels that come on the grinder, and it doesn't matter if it's a Rikon grinder or any of the other grinders. If the wheels don't get dressed, it's going to mess up the grind on your gouges, whether that's a bowl gouge, a spindle gouge, um, whatever. But one of the things, it depends on what I'm doing, but if I'm turning pens that are hybrids or resin, my go-to tool in the shop has been the T-Shadow Negative Rake Scraper. I beta tested that Negative Rake Scraper on hybrids, on resin, Alumilite resin, Clear Slow. I tested it on polyester resin. I tested it on wood, and I was pretty impressed, because that tool, it's been a game changer for me. So that's been my go-to for pen turning. Now, if I'm turning a bowl or something, I'll use a combination of my carbide tools and my bowl gouge and scraper. It just depends on what I'm doing. I don't turn too many bowls, but but the bowls are the projects where I tend to use the traditional a little more, because I at least on wooden bowls, I tend to get a better finish with the 3/8 inch bowl gouge that I have. So that's kind of where I'm at. We are still. I have teased it on a few. I have teased it on a few live streams that we were looking at building a shop, a 2-car garage. That's kind of hit some snags, just life and everything. So, we're still trying to figure out how that's going to work. So in the coming weeks, in the coming months, I'm not really sure what the live stream schedule is going to look like. I'm still going to try to do Tuesdays. I did put in an order to Turner's Warehouse, and I do have kits in my basement that need to be put on blanks that need turned. So next week we will turn something. I did get a couple new kits in that I've never turned before. I did get a couple junior dentist kits. I have a Zephyr that I don't have the bushings to yet, but I'm working on that. I also got some Tiny Giants, and there might have been one or two others, but yeah, those are that's what we'll do next week. So yeah. Angie says, "What did you mean by after I color the tools?" So when I go to sharpen traditional tools, the edge that I want to sharpen, what a lot of turners will do is they will take a Sharpie or some sort of marker and color that edge. And then when they go to put the tool on the sharpener and then they rock it back and forth to sharpen it, as they sharpen it, the Sharpie or whatever marker is on that edge, as it gets sharp or as it gets sharpened, the marker will disappear. So if there's still marker on that edge, on that bevel, you'll know that you haven't sharpened that area yet. So once all that marker is gone, you'll know that you've got the full edge sharp at that point. So that's That's why a lot of guys or a lot of turners will use either a Sharpie or a marker of some sort. They'll color their edge to see their progress. Kind of like if somebody is sanding, they might put pencil all over the sandings, all over the surface that they're sanding. As they're sanding, that pencil will go away on the high spots first, and once you get it to a flat, once you get that piece flat, eventually all of the marks will go away when you're sanding. All of the pencil marks will go away when you're sanding. So it's that same idea. You'll know that you got the entire surface once all the marks are gone. It's the same idea. Once all of the Sharpie is gone, you'll know that you sharpened your entire edge. All right, guys, we are coming up on about 50 minutes. If you guys have anything else, we can put it in the chat and we can talk about it. This one is fun. This one was fun. I know we didn't, cast anything or do a specific project or anything, but just having a sit-down conversation is fun once in a while. We will be back to turning next week. I do want to thank my patrons, Mark and Angie, one more time. I do appreciate your support. The link is in the description to Patreon if you guys are interested. If not, no big deal. I just appreciate that you guys are here checking out the live stream with me. Todd from TLF Works. He wasn't able to be here tonight, but he's the one who normally moderates my chat and the on-screen stuff. So his information is down below in the description as well. He has a YouTube channel. Please go subscribe to him. Like I said, next week we will be turning possibly a Junior Dennis, possibly a Tiny Giant, although it probably won't be a Tiny Giant because we've turned a couple Tiny Giants on live streams before. I think next week might be a Dennis kind of week. So we'll plan on doing that. If you guys are interested, we'll be turning the Dennis next week. You heard it here. So we'll plan on that. Okay, so if you guys don't have anything else, we will plan on meeting again and doing this next week. All right. Have a good week, everybody. We'll talk to you next week.